He's had an unusual career. At 16, he helped write the first networked email system. The crypto wars brought him to the attention of Richard Stallman, founder of Free Software Foundation. He's a professor of law and legal history at Columbia University Law School. He has represented many of the world's leading free software developers. Professor Moglen earned his PhD in history and law degree at Yale University during what he sometimes calls his long dark period in New Haven. After law school, he clerked for Judge Edward Wingfield of the United States District Court in New York City and to Justice Thurgood Marshall of the United States Supreme Court. He has taught at Columbia Law School and has held visiting appointments at Howard University, Tel Aviv University, and the University of Virginia since 1987. In 2003, he was given the Electronic Frontier Foundation's Pioneer Award for efforts on behalf of freedom in the Electronic Society. He's admitted to practice in the state of New York and before the United States Supreme Court. He says that we live in a free world and in which the right to tinker is under some very substantial threat. Let's hear what he has to say about it. Professor Moglen.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm particularly happy to be speaking in front of such a distinguished audience with so many recording devices. Let me say a few things quickly that are obvious in the hope that I might be able to make something less obvious out of their combination, a slight incremental improvement, let us say, on the state of knowledge in the subject. I'm speaking, of course, to persons already reasonably skilled in the art. Nothing that I say accordingly will be novel enough or non-obvious enough to earn me a 20-year monopoly on the ideas, but I'll hope for a small increase in social welfare anyway. The problem with patenting as a way of dealing with inventiveness with respect to computer software is an intense, annoying nuisance, threatening occasionally to develop into a serious social crisis. But it's useful to begin by asking a few basic questions about why we have a patent system that applies to software or to anything else at all. Patent policy, it is obvious, is in the beginning a form of social encouragement for technological transfer. The thesis that underlies patents, described however you please, is that the state has a responsibility, or at least a privilege, to secure for the community at large knowledge of technological improvements within a short period of time of their original invention, in return for some reward to the inventor who is willing to disclose. At the present time, in the world we live in now, this appears as an alternative to the principle of trade secrecy. In other words, those who have made developments intellectually capable of positive economic exploitation have a choice to keep secret what they have learned and to derive such profits as secrecy may afford them, or to disclose what they have learned in the hope of acquiring more by publication than they will get by privatization. But we should recognize that the patent, though it appears as the most privatized of intellectual assets, is actually, in theory, a compromise. Privilege in the economy in return for disclosure. Proposed in those terms, however, the employment of the patent as a device to attain disclosure in the 21st century makes little sense. An economist will tell you, if he bothers to think about the matter at all, that from an economic point of view, the patent is indistinguishable from a government reward handed out post the invention. Indeed, some right-wing economists in the United States I say right-wing not in deprecation, but in recognition of the political preferences of my colleagues and friends, some right-wing economists in the United States discovered with enthusiasm and vigor in the course of the 1990s, and after the deployment of a great deal of calculus and chalk dust, that they could model the entire behavior of the patent system from an economic point of view, with a simplification that consisted of simply opening up a window at the Treasury, which said, bring your good inventions here and we'll pay you a reward for them. The economists greeted this discovery that that would be identical in economic operation from an allocation point of view to the patent system, as though they had made an ingenious mathematical discovery. What they had in fact discovered was a distributive consequence to which, as typically is the case with neoclassical economic thinkers, they were originally insensitive. The only difference between a reward system to inventors ahead of time and a patent conveying a long-term monopoly in return for disclosure is who pays the taxes. In the prior case, the state raises reward money through its general principles of taxation and makes a discretionary decision whom to reward. In the latter case, the state either makes a dogmatic decision that all inventors receive monopolies upon some low-level proof of inventiveness, or alternatively exercises some discretion about which inventors to reward, and then gives them a private taxation power which they raise their reward out of the economy using through an exclusive right to control making and distributing subject to license. The private taxation system has its usual consequences. Those who have get, and those who have not are deprived. But this economic consequence, that no more is at stake than a reward raised by private taxation, suggests the real, actual, historical origin of the patent system. The patent system is a desirable approach to raising rewards to inventors in a society which sees itself as too poor to give rewards, but full of resources without of which rewards could be taken. I'm now speaking not of any 21st century developing society, but of the 18th century British North American colonies, out of whose experience our modern patent law springs. The makers of the United States Constitution and the founders of the United States Republic confronted an economic problem. Their problem was an excess of fixed resources and a scarcity of skilled population. Not even capable of imagining a universal education system, but expecting a wave of immigration, the fundamental goal of the founders of the American Republic was to incent the immigration of skilled technical workers, persons capable of producing a capital explosion in an economy of cheap resources, seeking opportunity to create skills and to magnify the capacity for manufactures. Those people who had in their keeping the political economy of the early United States, like the famous first Secretary of the United States Treasury, Alexander Hamilton, considered the possibility of government reward for inventors, left open by the Constitution of the United States as a policy for the encouragement of manufactures through the importation of skilled tradesmen. And here the bargain is a comparatively simple one. Bring your skills here. Bring your knowledge here. In return for disclosing the nature of your knowledge broadly, so that others may benefit from your teaching, we will give you a long-term monopoly in the economy, by which long-term means the unimaginable duration of, say, 7 or 14 years, in return for a real, working transfer of technological information to the society at large. And remember that this is a society which assumes, as American patent law assumed until 1962, that the transfer of knowledge would be embodied in a working model of the actual invention, such that it would be possible for a skilled tradesman, by consulting the patent office, reading the disclosures, and inspecting the working model, to have actual insight into the real business utility of the idea. A completion, if you like, on the dock, at the point of landing, of the process of technological transfer by skilled immigrants. Welcome to the country. Here's your license to make money. What's your idea? That's a fundamentally different conception of how to perform technological transfer and how to pay for it than any developed society would rationally choose to employ at the opening of the 21st century. It constituted wisdom at the end of the 18th century. It constituted wisdom in the 19th century. It had value in the 20th century for large established organizations, but nobody would ever have considered it in the 20th century a sufficient system for the production of anything technologically important. Let us just for a moment go away from the world of software to the other major world protected by the patent system at the moment, the world of high-priced proprietary pharmaceuticals. Surely, since pharma is the primary beneficiary of the patent system in the world, we should expect to see all of the innovation in pharma produced at what they are pleased to tell us always is great expense, through the mobilization of resources produced by the patent system. But, of course, the facts are nothing of the kind. The primary biomedical research driver of pharmaceutical progress in the United States and the enabler of the enormous explosion of pharmaceutical knowledge produced by the United States after the Second World War is a socialist institution of pre-invention reward giving called the National Institutes of Health. The enormous production of public resources to be given to inventors with known track records of success, to reward them in advance for seeking to invent on an allegedly merit-based system of judging the likelihood of successful invention through the renewal of research grants, is the basic driver of pharmaceutical progress in the United States. The patent system, after all, is a private taxation system, such as I have previously described, added on top of a reward system. But not even pharma itself has ever advocated in the United States the dissolution of the NIH and the abandonment of socialist subsidization of biomedical research and its complete replacement by the patent system. Were the patent system not primarily a form of rent-seeking on top of the actual infrastructure of invention, they would not love it as dearly as they do.